So here we are. We're at our source of data that we're going to be using for this project. We're at the World Weather Information Service webpage. I'm looking at Charlotte, North Carolina's data. You may be looking at data for another city around the world. And what we're going to be doing before we start entering data is we're going to think about how we want our spreadsheet set up. This will be the first time we're designing our own spreadsheet, and we want to make sure we do it right. Part of the reason we're using this data set is because it's a fantastic model for a good way to set up data. What you'll notice here is that every column in this table represents a variable of its own. We have the variable of month. We have the variable of low temperatures, mean daily minimum temperatures. We have the variable of high temperatures, mean daily high temperatures, and so on. Every column is its own variable. This is an excellent principle to follow when setting up a spreadsheet, which is what we'll be doing in Excel in a moment. So every column is a variable. Every row then is an observation. We have an observation associated with January, we have another observation associated with February, and so on. And so keeping this idea in our head, columns are variables, rows are observations, can be very, very helpful when we're setting up a spreadsheet of our own. So what we'll do now is, with this in mind, we're going to go over into an Excel and set up our spreadsheet so that we're going to be ready and organized for our data entry, which will be our next step before we start working with these data. So here we are. We're in Excel. We're ready to start entering our data, but first we need to set up our spreadsheet. One thing that you'll notice here is that I've already saved this file. I've given it a name, weather data, and I encourage you to do that as well. This is always a really good first step to get in the habit of, is to give your file a name and save it, and that way you're not going to lose anything and you're going to keep very organized with whatever you're doing in Excel. Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this sheet. I'm going to rename it CLT. That's the abbreviation for Charlotte. And now if I decide to put in weather data for other cities, I can have different sheets for those as well. So that's not really necessary if I'm only working with one set of data, but now at least I know that the data I'm working with come from Charlotte and North Carolina. What's next? The final thing we need to do in setting up our spreadsheet before we can enter data is just giving us our column headers, right? And so we're going to name each column because each column represents a variable. And you may recall that these were month, these were daily low temperature, the average, and daily high temperature, the average. We also have a column for precipitation, which we'll enter in as well. As we've seen before, sometimes our labels are too long for the column width, and so we can just double-click between those columns to automatically space the column to the right size. And finally, as a reminder, one thing I like to do is I like to bold that first row, those column headers, so that those stand out and we know that that's information separate from the rest of the data table. And now we're already all set to start entering our data, which is what we're going to do right now.